I'd like to call a regular meeting of council for Monday, December 9th, 2019 to order. To start with, I've got a presentation to make to firefighter Doug Beal. If I could call him to the center here, please. Okay. So the Governor General of Canada's Fire Services Exemplary Service Medal honors members of the Canadian Fire Service who have completed 20 years of service, 10 years of which have been served in the performance of duties involving potential risks. This evening, it is my great privilege to present this medal to one of Tumbler Ridge's own, Douglas Beal. Doug Beal began his service with the Tumbler Ridge Fire Department on August 25th, 1999. During his 20-year career, Mr. Beal has accumulated 2,960 training hours and has provided 1,340 hours in emergency responses while responding to 1,600 emergencies. He was promoted to the rank of senior firefighter in 2017, safety officer in 2018, and has been named Tumbler Ridge Firefighter of the Year twice. Congratulations, well done, and thank you. Okay, approval of the agenda. Recommendation, please, Councillor Norbury.
That the Monday, December 9th, 2019 regular council meeting agenda be approved as presented.
Seconder, Councillor Kirby. All in favor? Carried, thank you. November 18th, 2019 regular council meeting minutes. Adoption, please. Recommendation. Councillor Norbury.
That the Monday, November 18th, 2019 regular council meeting minutes be adopted as presented.
Seconder, Councillor Lehman. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Any business arising from the minutes, council? Staff? No? Okay, moving on to delegations, 6.1. Canooma Coal update. John Shadden, Jody Shimkus, and Blair Leckstrom to present to Mayor and Council with an update on Canooma Coal's Wolverine Environmental Assessment Amendment and to provide a general update.
Thank you.
Welcome, gents and Jody. Oh, sorry, not Jody. I could think so.
Well, we have a change in our delegation already.
Okay.
I'm guessing maybe that's Jody.
Jamie is with us. She's part of our lead team on the regulatory process. Jody is unavailable today.
Excellent.
Strategy, we keep seats really low. Not as low as this one.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Everybody ready just to proceed?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'll walk you through the presentation, and our intention here is to have more of a conversation, but to share some useful information. And of course, you can just jump in at any time if that works with your schedule to ask any questions. We have our top team here to make sure we have all the right answers. So I'm on this slide, and I apologize for the slide numbers on this one that just starts out who is Canooma Coal. So we are an independent metallurgical coal mining company here in northeastern BC. As many of you know, we've got our main offices here in Tumbler Ridge. And we supply and provide workforce arrangements for people all over the region. I'll get into our three operations here in a minute, but we supply quality, premium, hard coking coal, steelmaking coal for the steelmaking industry, as opposed to thermal coal, which is what you hear about in the news more and more. So I like to think we're on the right side of coal in terms of how the market goes. We have employ over directly 950 employees in our operations, and you know, I think the latest statistic is about 80% of them are local, and what we mean by that is they live and play in the areas that we all live in today, and that percentage can change, and I might not be tracking it perfectly, but that's a good number for the region here. I'm very proud. I get to meet all of our employees, and they're very committed not only to the local communities, but to the business, and they recognize that this is all of our livelihoods. And you know, we engage with over 250 supporting businesses, and again, that number changes regularly. I just had our Christmas parties over the last 2 weekends. I did some calculations, and you know, the amount of people that we touch every day, whether they be direct employees, families, children, partners and suppliers, it's phenomenal. But you know, we estimate 2,000 indirect jobs that are generated by us. And again, depending on what we have in terms of major maintenance projects, that number can fluctuate significantly. And you know, we're also, you know, with our local communities, but we're also proud to be partners and ongoing partnerships with 4 First Nations communities that are local to the area. Put you to the next slide, talking about our assets. So what you'll see here, and this is just some more detailed information about our 3 operations that we have and where they are, and I don't plan on getting into too much detail other than you can read this after council, and I'd be happy to take any questions afterwards, but I really want to get into the heart of the update of our project at Herman. This just shows you the different products that we make, the quantities that we have of each of our sites. One, we brought them online after we acquired the assets in 2016, and how we brought them up in an extremely short period of time for the benefit of everybody. And we do ship our coal to port. It goes on the CN rail line. So the recent strike, which certainly had our attention and had an impact to us, but it ended at the right time before we got too coal bound at our processing facilities. And at the same time, the Port of Ridley is where all of our coal gets shipped to and gets put onto vessels to go over to our overseas customers. And again, those relationships are working very well with CN and the Port of Ridley. So the next slide here, which is the title Wolverine Herman Amendment Project. We'll get right into updating you all on where we're at. So our current coal, permitted coal reserves at our existing Wolverine Mine Perry Creek pit expires, but runs out sometime next year. So the purpose of the Herman Amendment Project is just to continue our operations and extending our permit to allow continued operations for the same tonnage. Nothing is changing other than continuing to follow the coal seam and to continue to mine the coal seam. The mining method, the employees, the technology, the processing facility will continue to be the same coal processing facility where we wash the coal that comes out of the ground and get it onto a train. So other than where we're mining, is everything else is pretty much changing. Is that fair to say, Sam? So, staying the same. What did I say? Changing. Apologize. Take that off the minutes, please. So and you know, we don't have sometimes the luxury or the ability based on drilling or ability for the government to really permit all of our licenses in one shot so that we have 20 years of permitted reserves. I think those days are gone. But this will give us a 7-year extension and give us some certainty of life, both not only for our employees, but our partners, our suppliers, and most importantly, our customers. So that's what this Herman Amendment Project will give us. And you know, we have our 200 plus employees, and there'll be some construction activities. We'll need some pre-development work to get the areas ready in terms of ditches, roadways, accesses, set up the mining areas so that they're ready for our large equipment to come in and mine on stable footing, so that there'll be some contracting opportunities through this transition as well. So as I mentioned, you know, the second bullet on this slide, it talks about the reason why we need it is because we will be running out of permitted coal next year. So, and this isn't anything different. This is a normal sequence, right? We continue to mine and permit. We'll be coming and talking to you about other amendment applications for other operations in the normal sequence of time. So I don't want to give anybody, or the public or yourselves, any perception that this is something's changing or there's something wrong. This is just the normal development. So on October 16th of this year, we've submitted the formal amendment application for the environmental assessment, and at the same time, we submitted an amendment to the Mines Act for our permit extension. So these are major concurrent applications going on, major applications currently going on between the two agencies. And all of the other approvals that we need for the other ancillary work is all going to be reviewed and handled at the same time. I'll get into a little bit of why those are going concurrent in the future slide here. Switching slides to the second Wolverine-Herman project slide. So I mentioned earlier that, it's the same mining method, open pit mining methods. We're using the same equipment. We'll be transitioning from one to the other. And as I mentioned, we'll be using some contractors to help set the stage to receive our equipment to move over. And then we will be hauling that coal in trucks to the existing plant. We're not moving the plant, we're not putting in a new washing facility. It'll be the same processing plant that we'll use into the future here. So at the end of the day, Herman is necessary extension to keep business as usual. Next slide. So we've conducted, and again, to share the information of what are we doing in preparation of this project. We conducted a project socio-community survey that we've undertaken. We've completed 338 surveys, and really we're talking about the different industries, and we want to get a sense for the lifestyles we have in the area, the recreational uses, the family members, and as many people as we can to understand how the community benefits in the area and what overlap or impacts our projects may have, and what we can do to mitigate those. There's also a list here of baseline interviews we've had with some communities, some other clubs: Northern BC Tourism, Grizzly Valley ATV Club, the Wolverine Nordic and Mountain Society, Tumbler Ridge UNESCO, and our Global Geopark. So as we identify more stakeholders, but I think at this point in time we've got a pretty good solid list of who we need to consult, and we're well into the engagement process. And any input we have, our interest and desire is to hear and listen and mitigate any impacts or, like I said, overlaps that we might see with our projects. And the information was included in our amendment, environmental assessment amendment application. Next slide talks about Caribou. So, I mentioned earlier that our mines permit and environmental assessment are going concurrently. Usually they don't go concurrent, but early on, prior to me coming, and I joined. I expect all of you to remember I joined Canuma in March of this year. Bad joke, but I don't expect you to remember that. But, so there were lots of conversations going on before around Caribou prior to me joining, and originally with the plan we were to go to a property called East Bull Moose once the Perry Creek reserves exhausted. And through conversations with and I'm probably getting ahead of myself on slides here, right? Yeah. So I'm going to the next slide, Indigenous Relations and Agreements, sorry. So with conversations with First Nations, again, before my time, there was concerns about East Bull Moose and the elevation, the higher elevation aspects of that mining area and caribou habitat. And we had the Herman property as well as a continued operation, but we looked at that. It was a different elevation based. And it was kind of somewhat agreed, and again, I'm not trying to put words into anybody's mouths here, because I wasn't part of those conversations, but it was kind of agreed that if we could somehow defer East Bull Moose and go to Herman, it would be better on caribou, give the caribou communities and populations a chance to recover, and go to a less impactful area. And so long and short of it, that's the decisions amongst it. And First Nations groups were part of those conversations, not all of them, but some of them, and some of them that are directly involved in the ongoing caribou discussions that the Mayor and I were at a meeting last week as well. They're still ongoing, but the agreement was the right thing to do. It was the right thing for ourselves, and it was the right thing to protect the caribou. Canuma Coal is committed to doing that, and I skipped a previous slide, but we've deferred East Bull Moose. We've deferred over 5,000 hectares of licensed tenure out of our future to preserve and continue to contribute to caribou habitat recovery. And also, as part of our Herman Amendment application, we're working with the Caribou Working Group to develop caribou management and mitigation plans, and that could be supporting penning of caribou, maternal female caribou. It could be all kinds of different projects that could be undertaken to help recover, and we're going to continue to be part of that going forward. But if you take a look at a coal mining company, the value of our assets are having coal leases down the road to continue to mine, and the more you take those off the table, the more it impacts the value of the ability to continue mining into the future. So we think that these are meaningful concessions that Canuma has made to demonstrate our support for the caribou. Next slide, challenges. So there's two key headings here on regulatory certainty and sustainable operations, and I think industry always talks about regulatory certainty, and sometimes even town councils really are concerned with regulatory certainty and the livelihoods that are at stake in the communities. And I'm not here to suggest that we don't have regulatory certainty. What I'm here to say is to talk about the importance of making sure that we together collectively do our part to make sure our submissions are of sufficient quality to the regulators, and that we respond timely to their questions, but at the same time we do meet regularly with the regulators to make sure that they are holding their teams to the same level of standard as we are, so that together we can get through these things in the proposed timelines. That's what Canuma means by regulatory certainty. Our customers depend, and they're very much interested to know how much permitted reserves. They understand the importance of permitted reserve versus coal leases. And in fact, last summer I was flying one of our customers around in a helicopter to all of our sites out of Fort St. John, and the questions through the day is how much is permitted, how much is permitted. Why is that important? It's important to them because they have to de-risk their business, and one of the ways they de-risk their business is security of supply. They don't rely on one coal supplier, they rely on many coal suppliers. And they don't rely on one coal type, they rely on multiple coal types, and they have these formulas and these recipes, and they know how all of them go together, and they've been doing this for the last 30 years. Their mills are designed to these recipes. They can't, I shouldn't say can't, it's very difficult for them to change the recipes. So they need to make sure that they have the ingredients, and their ingredients is different coal suppliers, and Canuma is very much one of them, into their mix. So if they think that there's a risk 2, 3, 4 years out that the Canuma coal in the recipe is at risk, they will seek that coal somewhere else. And once they seek that coal somewhere else, it's very hard to get it back. So does it make sense on regulatory certainty and why that critical chain of marketing and sales continues on? And I'm not sharing this with you to say that there's any concern at this point in time, but that's why regulatory certainty is so critical to an export metallurgical coal business such as Canuma. So again, this is part of it, coming and talking to the communities about our projects and how important it is to us, and what we can do to mitigate any overlaps is very important to us. And of course, our sustainable operations. We're going through if anybody follows the export metallurgical coal market right now, pricing isn't the best, and it has certainly fallen off significantly from what it was from the wrap up of our operations from being idle. So we're working very hardly at the operating level. We got to look at what we can control. We don't control sea and rail, we don't control the port, but we control our operations to make sure that we have the efficiency, making sure that our productivity is up, making sure that our workforce continues to be motivated in uncertain times, which is a challenge because they look at the marketplace as well. So we're working very hard and really very diligently with our teams, and our teams are responding. Our workers are great. They recognize the variability in the market. They've lived through it. We've all lived through it in this business, and they're stepping up to really make a difference going forward. So that's the stuff we control, and we're looking at our mine plans and where we can alter them as well to reduce our operating costs. But even with that, our owners, our board are committed to northeastern BC, and you take a look at even this year in 2019 with the markets, we still invested $25 million to buy new haul trucks at Wolverine. You can argue, why would you do that? And I'm saying, why wouldn't you do that? Because that shows you how committed we are to improving our efficiency in the operation. And the last slide is community support. So, we work, and my predecessor has worked very hard within the community, and we want to continue that giving back concept and mentality. We all are here in this together through the local businesses, giving the local businesses business, and working with the schools and working with our youth growing up. So that's why you see the picture on the top right of kids in one of our buckets from our schools. But again, why are we here? We want to make sure that we continue to build awareness so that you're all aware of where we're at, the purpose of the project. We get questions answered, and if we're gone too far before we come back, I know, Mayor, you're welcome, or councilors, you're welcome to give me a call, and we'll meet with you anytime. It's important that we gather input, and I talk about overlaps, but I also talk about impact, whether that be community, other businesses, and the environment, and traditional territories and traditional lands of our First Nations partners. Gathering that input, and we're also working on changing the plan continually. And as the amendment application gets reviewed, that might generate some changes, and as we go between now and getting approval in Q2 or Q1 at the end of Q1 or early Q2, which is so critical to our ongoing full existence, we will do whatever we need to address those.
Thank you very much, John. Council, any questions? Councilor Norbert.
I just have a couple of brief ones. Thank you all for coming in. First point, I have 2 points. The first one is about the caribou issue. I'm glad to see that that you're taking a proactive stance on this, and it's good to see Mr. Lekstrom here because he's sort of the expert on the subject right now, and so I'm sure you guys are going to do everything you can to ease those fears. And then the second part, my question is, do you foresee any downtime in coal production during this transition?
No, our plan is to, and that's a regulatory certainty question, if you recall, but our plan is to have a planned out transition. So as our mine plan unwinds and our coal reserves deplete Perry Creek, we're ramping up, our approvals are coming in on time, and that's, I mentioned, we work very closely with the regulator and timelines, because there could be, I don't want to say piecemeal, but there could be like developmental permits that could come out earlier to get us in there and start the pre-work of roads and access and ditching, so the water management is all in place. So it's a long-winded answer, but right now the plan is to have a nice orderly transition where we have no interruption of coal supply.
Perfect. Councilor Majinski.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. Thank you very much for the presentation, John. Just in regards to the actual tonnage for Wolverine, at 1.8 million tons. Now going into Herman, would that be very similar? Is it the same coal seam, same amount, or does it peter off or get larger in that area? Or
Yeah.
just as just a general question, actually.
Yeah, so the same coal train continues into Herman. The variations of the seams differ, but it's the same seams, the same blend that we're looking, the same products that we're going to be producing in the same production rates.
So then the same amount of employees and everything else going forward.
Correct.
Just moving straight forward.
Correct. We plan on transitioning all of our equipment and all of our people over to Herman.
Perfect. Council. Councilor Howell.
First, I'd like to just start off by thanking you, Canoe and Coal, and your management team for your continued presence in Tumbler Ridge, and most importantly, for keeping camps at Tumbler Ridge. I think it's totally critical and crucial for our community to build, and for Chetwynd to build, that we don't have camps in Tumbler Ridge. I don't hear anything or any talk or any chatter out there of camps for Herman Mine, because I think there's going to be some construction going on.
Yeah.
But the employees will transfer from one to the other. So just like thank you for that to get started with. That's what we desperately need to build our community's population. And you guys are definitely providing, I know at your cost, a lot of times you're not having costs. I know how difficult it is to find employees. And I just wanted to put that out there. Secondly, I just wanted to touch on access to Herman and employee access to Herman Mine. Do you anticipate going up the Wolverine for access to Herman, or do you anticipate that traffic flow will go the opposite direction and go up the old Quintet Road that they use to access Top Shop?
Yeah, primary access is gonna be up the Wolverine to 8.2 kilometer and then over the mast, and that goes right to Neighbors Road or the start of Herman. Secondary or emergency egress would be the Murray.
So then your coal trucks will be running with your buses and traffic, similar to what you're doing on Wolverine right now?
Correct.
Okay. And last thing I'd like to just say is there anything that we can do as a council to help? Is there anything that we're missing or anything that we can get on board with to help make this happen or put our 2 cents in?
Not at this time, and listen, I appreciate the support, and I think listening to me talk about project certainty and why it's so important, and it's not because we just want to permit by a certain time, and we've got all these options. We don't have a lot of options. We only have 3 operations. The other 2 operations have different coal products than Wolverine, so it isn't like we can ramp up Willow to compensate for a blip in an interruption in coal production out of Wolverine. We don't have options, and so project certainty is important. So as long as you're aware of that, and if government comes and asks you for your input on Canuma's need for timelines, and I'd be happy to give you any information you have. So if you get questioned around why this timeline is so important, I want to make sure you have the information to answer that. That's how you can help us. At this point, thank you for the offer, and if something comes up, we'll certainly give you a bet.
Thank you. Councilor Lehman?
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand, and thank you for coming in. Hey, you've already touched on it, John, about the regulatory process. I'm just wondering how confident you are that the government is going to okay this project in a timely enough manner so that you can go ahead at the, I mean, there's a lot of work obviously that needs to be done before you can even haul coal, so this seems like they need to step it up and make it fairly quick.
Right. Well, I think, I am actively engaged with the dialogue at progress meetings on both sides with the regulatory body, reviewer teams and our teams to make sure that both sides have what they need to move these things forward. So the communication is wide open, the dialogue is happening, the exchange of information is going back and forth. And I'll make a little joke, once you get engineers involved, sometimes they want to get into something that's academically interesting but irrelevant to getting the regulatory process going forward. But I say that as a joke because I'm an engineer. But I'm quite encouraged on the level of communication and cooperation that's going on both sides. And I don't mean to say that there's sides, but dialogue is going on. Sam's in the thick of things as well, and going forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Howell?
One final one there just came to me again. There is the underground option in Wolverine effectively done? Is it off the table?
No.
Okay. I'll take that.
Well, I think that falls, I don't maybe give you a smart answer, but no, it's very much on the table. So when I talk about there'll be other applications in the future, so let's get this in the books, get it to a point where we see the light at the end of the tunnel and some certainty that it's really going to come across the line. And then in the background, we're working on what's next. And we're going to keep it kind of flow. We don't want to flood the regulator with approvals because their resources are limited at the same time.
Perfect. Council, anything else? Thank you very much for coming in today, and you certainly have this council's support. We all know how much Canuma contributes to this community and the region, so we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, moving on to 6.2, TR Days Society Fairgrounds. Terry Cosgrove and Zach Cooper on behalf of TR Days with a proposal for a festival grounds lease. Welcome.
Well, I just want to say, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
For having us. We are here tonight regarding the property formerly known as the Vista Laydown Yard. It has been discussed that the district is looking to turn it into permanent festival grounds, and as As the planning committee for numerous successful events here in Tumbler Ridge, the TRDA Society would like to offer to take the lead for the development. The society is proposing that we lease the property from the district of Tumbler Ridge for $1 per year with the intent of a 3-year lease. First right of refusal as well for a subsequent year. We believe that this proposal will benefit the Ridge, TRDA Society, and the groups in Tumbler Ridge, as well as the residents as well. If the TRDA Society is to hold the lease for this desired festival area, will have the opportunity to apply for grants and available to upgrade the grounds as well. I'm going to pass this off to Terry so that she can get into a little bit more detail for you.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Would you like me to outline the proposal as it stands? I can read it out, or would you just like to?
Council, would you like to hear the proposal? Councilor Norbury.
I read the proposal, so.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I think it's good for anybody watching if the delegation went over the proposal.
Sure. Please.
Sure. TRDA Society would cover the operational costs, except the ground maintenance, which we would like performed by the district employees as required. In exchange, the district would be given 3 free uses of the grounds for their events. In 2020, TRDA Society will partner with the District of Tumbler Ridge to host the Pumpkin Patch. The Society will also bring back and host the Fall Fair and very popular Glennon's Yard Hunt. In year 2 and subsequent years, other events will be added to this location. The property will also be available to other groups who wish to host events. Nonprofits will not be charged, but it is possible that as buildings are constructed, rentals for weddings and other events will be available. Other benefits of the lease will be bringing events to the community, stability of events because they have a permanent location, providing a location that can be used by other groups. The society will provide our own insurance and will also give the TRDA Society a place to store its physical assets. In 2020, the society would hope to complete the fencing, purchase some tents for the events, and host the previously mentioned events. In 2021, we would like to get the funding and build a permanent stage with a storage area and backstage areas as well. This stage could be used for Gristfest, but also for community theater, movie events, outdoor church services, weddings, and other events. In order to raise money for this operation of the festival grounds, as well as purchasing capital items, the society would apply for grants and would also approach industry for funding. Naming rights for items such as grounds, buildings, stage, etc. could be offered to industry. Upon expiration of the lease, the capital improvements would belong to the District of Tumbler Ridge.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you, Terry. Council? Any questions? Councilor Norbury?
Thank you for coming in, Terry and Zach and others. So, firstly, I'd like to say I'm glad that somebody has stepped up and wants to try and develop this area. As you know, a few of us have visions. I think a lot of council has visions and what can go out there, and it's exciting to see that we have some buy-in from our local groups. How many days do you plan to have this space open to the public or to be used?
Right now, as it stands, we have only the 3 events planned for next year. So that is just our events. That doesn't include any other nonprofit or community groups that are doing events out there. So we need to start somewhere, and this is kind of the 3 big events to start with.
I think Councilor Norbury was curious on if the grounds would be open to the public on a regular basis just to go out and use, or would it be a locked gate? Is that kind of what you're looking
Correct,
at?
yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of thinking it would be a lock gate for now.
Okay. Councilor Howell?
I guess my questions would be probably directed more towards staff. Just one of my concerns is the anticipated ground condition. Like that was only just reseeded in October, and you know what we would turn over to them is basically sand, and that hydro seed is. Were we given any timeline or any definition of how long that we have to wait before we can utilize the ground easily?
Yeah, hopefully if the seed catches, it should catch next summer, but I think the first event you were planning was September, was it?
Yeah, we're thinking because of the hydro seeding and we could not possibly do a Grizz Fest for 2020, we're thinking that our first event would be the Fall Fair in September. And with that being said, we would keep mainly to the area that is not hydro seeded, that is gravel and right now, so that we could do all three of those on that space if we needed.
Yeah, there's a possibility we may have to rope off that seeded area and all that too until it takes, yeah. Councillor Howe?
And then the idea of capital improvements, I think that's good, that, we would eventually own those capital improvements, but how would that work within the district to, so that we make sure that they're built to the correct standard and they're built to so I think we've had other things that we have that have not been built to the correct standard, comes back to the district and they say, here you go, we built this for you, well, that's great, now we gotta tear it down. So how can we ensure, is that something that we would work into the lease agreement, or that the district would stay in, to make sure that that's done correctly? Like,
I would think so. I think we
temporary
could.
structures and stuff, we can't, we don't see that out there, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could certainly look into in the lease as well as, but also bringing it to the attention of TRDs as well to ensure the construction standards are met for sure. Councillor Majinski.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. Thanks for the delegation. And I just had a couple questions on costs on fencing. Have you guys gotten any costs on fencing at all to finish it off? Any quotes?
Not at all. The area is locked. We can't actually access the area at all, so we don't even know how many feet it is of fencing we need.
Okay. And have you also looked at any grants as of right now that you could apply for? Do you have a...
We are looking into grants as we speak. We're kind of at a standstill because we don't have the lease on the property. So we can't really go ahead with much until we have kind of a definite answer.
Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. Yeah, thanks for coming in, you guys, for your presentation. Do you guys have the funds to put on the 3 events that you have planned at the moment?
No, the events that we have would definitely, we would be looking into grants for.
Okay. Councillor Howe.
And I would assume that what is being proposed is allowed in the recreational zoning area. It sounds like it is, but I just want to, before we go too far down this road.
Mr. Wall. Yes. Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a good start. It's having some group that's ready to come in and take over the planning of some events out there. I think we need to have a discussion kind of on the naming rights and who would be, is that we're waiting to hear back from staff on the policy that's going to be put forward. Would we be the ones looking at getting the naming rights for the park or whatever, and then giving the funds back to the TRD Society? And then also just on storage, you're saying that you're going to store equipment out there. Now we have just built a storage yard. Will you need to store any of this stuff from?
Just one moment here, Terry.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was conflict for.
Yeah, just on the storage. Will you need to? Would you move all the TRDs?
We certainly could, if we needed to free up space in the nonprofit yard. We have 4 trailers over there. We also have a dunk tank. We have barricades, all that kind of stuff. The one cargo trailer we use strictly as storage. It is non-Grizz Fest related, is TRD's stuff. So when we're talking about putting that out there, we would be using that space and building on. So yeah, certain things we would want on that space. And sorry to mention again, we would have the events to go forward with the pumpkin patch and the fall fair. It's the Halloween that we would require more sponsorship.
Okay. Council? Well, I think this is a intriguing idea, and I appreciate you coming forward with it, and we'll certainly be discussing it here shortly. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much.
Councilor Kirkowski.
Just to you, how are we gonna bring this forward? We're gonna get the staff from the
Ken, yeah.
just wondering, how's it gonna come back?
Yep, yeah.
So just wondering if some direction should be given. So staff doesn't leave it off the table, right? Not given direction, nothing will come back.
So the next availability to talk about it would be our January meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Wall?
Yeah, if you're looking to have a general conversation with PNP in January, or you could ask for staff before we imagine that would be prepared for the first meeting in January, but I'd have to check the vacation scheduling, we're getting late.
Councilor Kirkowski.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be looking at a PNP. I think we had a great delegation in regards to what they're looking for. So they made a staff report. I'm not sure if we put a motion out there looking for a staff report on that, so it comes back and we have the idea what staff is looking at doing for it.
Please do.
I'll make a motion that we ask staff to produce a staff report in regards to a lease with TRDs.
Seconder. Councilor Kirby. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in. 6.3. Shift Collaborative Northeast Climate Risk Network. Erica Crawford via teleconference on behalf of Shift Collaborative to provide council with background and results of the Community Climate Vulnerability Assessment for Tumbler Ridge. Erica, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much for accommodating this by phone. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you the work that we've been doing through the Northeast Climate Vulnerability Assessment with your community and others in the region. So I understand that you guys have the slide deck in front of you. I will try to indicate when to advance it, and hopefully you can just follow along as well with the description that I'll be giving. Is there anything else before I get started?
No, I think we can go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if we go to the second slide, just have a quick outline of what I'll go over. I'll start with a little bit of a rationale for the project itself, and then give an overview of some of the work that was done to provide regionally specific information on the climate science in your area. And then I'll also speak to this project specifically and some background on the network that is doing this work, and then share with you the results of the actual vulnerability and risk assessment that we've done and where that's leading. So if you go on to slide 4, preparing for climate change, climate adaptation. So what we're talking about here, when we talk about climate change, often we could be talking about two different things. One is climate mitigation, which is the need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, or the source and the cause of the changes that we're seeing. And what we're talking about with this project is really what to do about the impacts of the changes that we're seeing. So we're talking about adaptation and resilience, and that's the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to the kinds of events that I will share more about as we go on here. On the next slide, we know that this is of great concern because not only are these things happening elsewhere, they're happening here as well. You have had experience recently of various events such as flooding and wildfire that are expected to get worse over the coming years in frequency and both the magnitude of the events as well. Some of these things are affecting your community directly, and some are affecting things in the region, transportation infrastructure, or other communities that then has an impact on your community. So there's a whole range of things, but these are things that are already being experienced and that we can expect more of going forward. The next slide, this is also of concern because it's costing us. So globally, we see that the cost of these types of events, the damage that's being caused, and the insurance costs as well are going up. And in Canada, the Insurance Bureau of Canada has reported that costs between 1983 and 2008 were approximately 400 million per year in terms of their payouts for these types of events. And then from 2009 to 2017, that figure rose to 1.8 billion. So 400 million to 1.8 billion. And that was largely due to floods that were responsible for a lot of that. So this is costing us, and it's pertinent that we plan ahead. So on the next slide, just speaking to that cost benefit of taking proactive action, this is common sense, but we have more assessments and studies showing the efficiency of addressing some of these risks in advance rather than waiting for the damage to happen and then paying for the cost of them after. We go on to the next slide. I'll just speak a little bit to some of the key climate projections. This is some work that was done specifically for the Northeast region as part of this project, and I'll just walk through some of the key findings about how climate is projected to change. On the next slide, increased average precipitation in all seasons. One of the changes that we're anticipating is more rain, more precipitation in all seasons. And for Tumbler Ridge particularly, a big part of that is expected to come in the spring and the fall. So about 80 millimeters more on average annually, but then in the spring about 30 millimeters and fall 35 millimeters. So the vast majority of that precipitation falling more in the spring and fall. The next slide. In addition to more precipitation overall, we are also expecting that more of that precipitation will fall all at once. So these are the kind of intense rainfall events that we've been experiencing more of in recent years. And in the past, this indicator is the wettest 5 days in a year. So choosing those 5 wettest days was about 70 millimeters for the past baseline, which was the average of 1971 to 2000. And that is expected to increase by about 10% annually, but again, more so in the fall and the spring, so 18% or 15% more in the fall and the spring. So those bigger events getting bigger, especially in spring and fall. Next slide, the one that everyone likes to see, the coldest days less cold. So looking at the coldest days in the winter time, the baseline for those have been, the coldest days were about minus 27 degrees Celsius over that time period. And it's projected that those will increase, warm up by about 6 degrees Celsius. So somewhere around minus 20 would be the coldest days. And then the next slide, fewer cold days. So again, there's the magnitude is going to decrease, and then there will be fewer of the cold days. So this one is ice days. So those days where the daytime high doesn't rise above freezing. And in the past, that was 102 days in a year, and that's expected to decrease by about 25% by the 2050s. On the other hand, increased hot days is something that we can expect more of. This is, on the one hand, a welcome change. On the other, it's of concern for human health, and various other factors can affect agriculture and different things. What we're looking at here is days above 25 degrees Celsius. And in the past, over that baseline period, we had about 6 days per year that were above 25, and that's expected to change to around 15 days in the 2050s and 32 days in the 2080s. The next slide, growing season. So this is one that we often think of when we're thinking about the changing climate, because there could be some benefit to the warming climate. And so that growing season length, the potential growing season length in the past was 140 days, and we expect that to increase by about 40 days, or almost a 30% increase by the 2050s. And important to note that that's, of course, potential growing season, because there's all sorts of factors in terms of how long an actual growing season will be in any given year. And then the next slide shows a bit of a graph. This is Flatbed Creek, and it's just showing the flows in that creek and seeing a common pattern in how that might change over time. By the 2050s, you can begin to see a bit of a difference where there's less water available in the summer fall. So the black line is the baseline, and then the green is the projected change. And so less water available in summer and fall. And then by the 2080s is where you really start to notice a pattern where the peak flow is quite a bit lower and earlier in the spring. And then you can see that the water availability is shifting, whereas a lot available in May or June, July, to much more in the winter, spring, and less in the summer and fall. So that's sort of an overview of what the projected changes are and some of those key factors. And I'll just go into a bit of the project background. On the next slide, the Northeast Climate Risk Project. So this project is a partnership. It's convened by the Fraser Basin Council, and 6 communities in the Northeast region are part of this. So in addition to Tumbler Ridge, we have Chetwynd, Quisqueby, Dawson Creek, Fort St. John, and Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. And the purpose of this project is to support the local government partners in preparing for these changes and better understanding what the risks and vulnerabilities could be to your communities, and then to come together collaboratively to address these risks and really leverage the knowledge and experience across the different communities so that we can learn together, and also to increase the awareness in the communities about the impacts of climate change through a variety of ways. The next slide, the project deliverables. So this project had 3 key deliverables in this first phase, which has started in January 2018 and is wrapping up soon. So the network itself was one of those deliverables, establishing this group, which was the municipalities as well as academic and provincial government partners. And they've been meeting periodically to support this work together. And the first other deliverable was the climate projections report that I've just shared a little bit of information from. So that's the climate modeling and the climate science report that was done specifically for this region for this purpose. And then what I'll share with you a little bit more now is the community vulnerability assessment. On the next slide, the project process. We took the climate science as the starting point and then reviewed. The first step was a gap analysis. So we reviewed programs and policies and documents available for the community and conducted some interviews to identify what was already going on and where some of those vulnerabilities could be for the community. And then we used that information to develop a set of possible impacts that could affect the community. And then we brought that to a group, a multi-stakeholder group, to ground truth that, provide feedback on that, and then do an assessment of the vulnerability and risk to the community from those types of impacts. And then finally, operationalizing that by looking at what actions currently are going on and what else could be done to start to address some of these vulnerabilities and risks. So we'll go forward a couple of slides to gap analysis. And in addition to identifying where there were some need to address various vulnerabilities and risks, we also identified where there are existing strengths and wanted to highlight this because there's a lot going on already that is related to the kinds of changes that we will see more of. So this isn't entirely new work. It's in often case is that this is just additional information that can better inform the kinds of decisions that we're already making on a daily basis. So in your community, you've done a lot of work, for example, things like making sure that there's backup power to critical infrastructure. You've got an asset management program that has really been a priority, and that is a great strength in your community. The emergency response plan that you have, your fire reduction plan, and also the focus on economic diversification. So all of these types of things are already building resilience in ways that help to address some of the vulnerabilities and risks that we identified in this study. On the next slide, risk and vulnerability, this just lays out theoretically the kind of framework that we're following when we do a risk assessment like this. And I'll just start by speaking to vulnerability, which is the first step. And that's a combination of looking at what is exposed to these changes in climate and how sensitive those things are to the impacts. And then also on the other side, looking at to what extent is the system and can the system prepare and respond. So both the direct impact of those things, but also, of course, this is a system that can move and change. So looking at the ways that is already where there's capacity to actually deal with those changes. On the next slide, high vulnerability. These were just a few of the things that came out of the initial assessment, which started to prioritize what some of the key impacts would be for the community, looking at things like the way that that drought and the lower water levels that I mentioned in summer and fall, how that could affect water supply. Wildfire was a really big one that came out in the assessment, as well as various other types of flooding, both the more intense rainfall events that could directly impact the community, and then other types of events that could affect more of the transportation infrastructure and the accessibility in and out of the community itself. Also mentioned in that was the size of the fire department. They're very active and playing a really important role, but just the size of that could also be a vulnerability, and the energy supply as well, being that there's just one source, was something that you're already contending with, but that was another one that came out. On the next slide, just gives you a visual of the risk assessment results. And so from that initial prioritization based on vulnerability, we then looked at what is the consequence of each of those higher priority impacts happening. What are the types of damage to economically, culturally, environmentally, socially, etc., and giving it a rating to that. Sure.
Still there, Erica? Still there, Erica? I think we may have lost.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Hi there. Possibly.
Did you hear the description of the risk assessment?
Yes. Yep.
Tricks? Yeah.
Sure did.
Okay. So on the next slide gives a summary of what those top 5 risks were. So once we did that assessment with the consequence and likelihood, these were the ones that came out on top. And you'll notice that wildfire is a big one. So that one came out in 2 or 3 of these. And so that was a big concern, both regionally, the impacts to health and mental health due to air quality and to repeatedly experiencing these types of events, as well as just the overall wildfire risk in the region, and that could directly and indirectly affect the community. And combined with also landslides and floods in other parts of the region, the impact to evacuation routes and transportation in and out of the community, and of course also to supply lines through that, was another one. And the more localized flooding due to the intense rainfall events was also in the top, and also the impact that this has cumulatively over time, all of these different types of impacts and the pace of change that we might see, and the way that could affect residents and service providers and people who are responding to these types of events as well, was also seen as an important risk. Mm-hmm. The next slide, we could just skip over to the next one, slide 32. We have an increase in other extreme events, is what it says at the top left there. So this just gives a snapshot of the results that you can see. There's a summary report that's available for anyone who would like to dig a little bit further and see what the results look like. This is an example of that. So within the increase in other extreme events, there was a whole range of different impacts of concern. And so these are ranked based on that risk assessment rating, high, medium, and medium. And then the other icons you can see are all the different colors give you some indication of the range of service areas that are affected by each of these impacts. So this really crosses the whole range of what you're responsible for as a community. And so this is trying to also just highlight where those impacts would be and which would be the highest risk. And on the next page, you can just see that this is, we have this for other types of impacts as well, due to the intensity and frequency of precipitation and warmer winters. So all of those have been assessed, and there's a little bit of a summary there. So you can get that if you would like. And moving on, the last step that we took was to take all of those high-risk impacts and working closely with staff, identify what is already happening and what could happen to address some of these risks and mitigate some of the risks that you're facing. So, so this just gives a little bit of an overview of some of those things, and you'll notice that most of them start with the word continue. So a lot of this is work that's already happening by the municipality, and then some other pieces where bringing a climate lens could improve and the types of actions that are being taken and just better inform the decisions that are happening to take into account what those future conditions will be.
Perfect.
And then key messages, just to end on, the network, just wanted to mention this is a growing resource. They've been working together for 2 years now, and it's something that's unique in BC, and it's a really great resource to continue to learn and draw on each other. And already some learning has been happening about what each other is doing and sharing those ideas across the communities. And as I mentioned, Tumbler Ridge is already doing many of these things. This work really provides a basis to be able to apply a climate lens more consistently across the organization. So just highlighting those places where these things haven't necessarily been taken into account yet and filling in some of those gaps. So it's a reference for that type of work. And also there are various funding sources that are now asking for a climate lens to be applied. So you have this reference and this work to inform that and hopefully allow you to access some of that funding as well.
Yes. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And happy to take any questions if there's time.
Great information, Erica. Thank you very much. Council, do you have any questions? Nope. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Bye now. Okay, moving on to
Participant exiting.
Erica Crawford.
consent agenda. Recommendation, please. Councillor Norbury.
That all the items in the December 9th, 2019 regular council meeting consent agenda be adopted for information.
Seconder, Councillor Kirby. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Anyone like to discuss anything on the consent agenda? I'd like to move to discuss or open for discussion 7.2. Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. Seconder, Councillor Norbury. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Just curious if council had a chance to look over that proposal and if they would be interested or wanting me to sit on that committee. Councillor Norbury.
I recognize the importance that we need to make sure that we are maintaining an inclusive community that is free from racism, and the UN and UNESCO seem to be giving frameworks for local communities to facilitate this. In my opinion, I believe that we have more important topics that our attention should be focused on, and as important as this is, I would be concerned at loss to the more important issues to Tumbler Ridge.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, very well. Thank you. Moving on to bylaws. 8.1 Fire Protection Bylaw number 680, 2019, final adoption. Report from the Director of Protective Services dated December 9th, 2019. seeking final adoption of the fire protection bylaw number 680, 2019. Recommendation, please. Councilor Majinski.
That the District of Tumbler Ridge Fire Protection Bylaw number 680, 2019 be adopted.
Seconder, Councilor Kukalka. Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. New business 9.1. Admin 38, golf course fee waiver amendments. A report from the Deputy Director of Corporate Services dated December 9th, 2019, seeking approval of amended policy admin 38. Recommendation, please. Councilor Kukalka.
The council approves amended admin 38, approved exempt events policy.
Seconder, Councilor Lehman. Any comments? Councilor Kirby.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I will still be voting against this motion. I feel that it'll still keep coming back to council. This is just regarding the golf cart rental. We have okayed for the TR Cares to have the golf carts at that one tournament, and then there'll be 2 more tournaments that can apply. I just feel that each time it will come back to council again, and I can see us moving them forward in the future. So I'm going to be voting against this amendment.
Okay. Councilor Nobrick.
I agree with Councilor Kirby. I'm against this change for the similar reasons. I mean, I don't think we would realistically ever say to an organization that's a nonprofit that wants to fundraise for a noble event or cause and tell them, sorry, we're going to cut the amount of money that you can receive to your noble cause because we want to make some money off cards.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I still think the golf course is run by the district, and if we're going to keep giving everything away, then what's the point of even running it? Why do we charge anybody? I think that the small amount that you have to pay for a cart, it's $25 for 18 holes. You've got 2 people on it. That's $12. I don't think that should have such a big impact on how much money they raise. I just don't like giving everything away all the time. I think there's got to be a cutoff, and I just don't see why we keep having to give stuff away.
So you're speaking in favor of this?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's fine.
Councilor Majinski.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. My only concern is if we have to have it come back onto an agenda and the time frames of them asking to get their fee waiver of the carts waived, it's just going to be costing more in our time, having less delegations come in or staff time to put it on our agenda than it's even worth. Truthfully, I believe, because it's going to be 18 carts maybe, if that. Maybe even if they double it up. I don't think, because a lot of people have their own carts. A lot of people are avid golfers, so they all have, or they pair up with friends. So I think the carts should be included in the fee for these 3 events that apply for them when they do it on time. So.
Okay. Councilor Howe.
I don't think the car should be included. We voted to move this forward with what we had. It can continue with debate, but we had 5 out of 7 that voted to move it forward the way that it was. To me, a cart is a luxury. You don't have to have a cart to go golfing. If you want to participate in a golf event, you can get yourself a cart as a luxury, but you don't have to have one. So you can walk the golf course. Many people.
Councilor Norwood.
Yeah, this is sort of address a comment Councilor Howe made. I mean, just because council makes a motion or in favor of something doesn't preclude someone from bringing it up again. I believe Councilor Howe has been on the other side of that many times. Now, when it comes to cost recovery, we don't operate on a cost recovery basis for the golf course. We're always, every time we rent out the carts, we are going to lose a certain amount of money. So, I just see it as we are hindering the capacity for these 3 organizations from fundraising for their event. That's where I see it. And I absolutely agree with you, Councilor Lehman, that there is a time when we have to say not everything's for free. Just in this case, I think for 3 events, I think, and that we all have to approve. it's reasonable.
Okay. I'll call the question on the motion here. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 9.2, online banking access update. Report from the Director of Corporate Services dated December 9th, 2019. To obtain a resolution of council to reflect an updated district staff approval for access to the district's banking information, accounts, online banking, and front counter service at the Lakeview Credit Union in Tumbler Ridge. Recommendation, please. Councilor Kirby.
Yes, I'll move the recommendation that council grants approval for the Chief Administrative Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, and Diana Geese, Financial Manager, to access the district's banking information and accounts by way of online banking and front counter service at the Lakeview Credit Union, Tumbler Ridge.
Thank you. Seconder, Councilor Gorkowka. Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 9.3, Airport Infrastructure Replacement Policy. A report from the Director of Operations and Infrastructure dated December 9th, 2019, seeking adoption of the Airport Infrastructure Replacement Policy. And we'll do each recommendation separately, please. Recommendation, please. Councilor Majinski.
That council adopts the airport infrastructure replacement policy.
Seconder, Councilor Norbury. Open for comments. Councilor Howell.
Is there a report on the airport infrastructure from any sorts?
Mr. Wall.
Yes, there is. I shared it with council 2 weeks ago. I'll check into it, but I know we shared it with council. And it's got a detailed overview of what the airport is, how it started, the current state of the infrastructure, and why it needs to be replaced.
Okay, Councilor Howell.
And in that report, like, is there? I didn't read it, I didn't see it there, but is there something in there that talks about, like, how we come up with a number of $435,000 for the electrical replacement?
Yeah, I believe that was in this report. It came with a stipulation of above 10% contingency there. Yeah, financial budgetary implications there, page 77.
Yeah, like, how do we come up with a 380,000 number? Like, where does that number come from?
From the company that would supply the lighting, I believe. Mr. Wall?
So we had a company come in and do an airport assessment, and they took a look at all the infrastructure within the airport and did estimates on what it would cost to replace it. So the company that came in specializes in these type of airport assessments, so they've got a lot of experience in what's needed. So what they left us with wasn't just a price, but an idea of what type of lights we need to buy, how that's going to increase visibility, what type of lighting. And based on those designs, the cost was estimated at the $435 you see here.
Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Your Mayor. So firstly, I'd like to address, the rest of council. I know that if I have issues, that I take time out of my busy schedule to come and talk to staff, so I'm opposed to these questions that we have already had answers to, both in this report, if it was read, and emails previously. Moving forward, I support this airport infrastructure replacement policy as outlined from the BC Air Assessment. It's an important part of our community where people can come in not only for emergency personnel, but as well as other important operations in our community.
Yep, I agree with you. I think overall the infrastructure that we've been blessed with in Tumbler Ridge is definitely extreme for a community of our size, and I think we're spoiled in that fact, but we also have to take on the responsibility of updating and maintaining that infrastructure. So this is another one of them, I do believe, so I will support this policy as well. Any other comments? Councillor Howell?
Yeah, well, I read the report, I just don't see where the $380,000 come from. I'm just looking for a little more background information before I make that decision. And the email that Mr. Wall's talking about, I unfortunately didn't see. And anybody who walks into this room that isn't privy to that information doesn't know where we're spending that money on either. So it would be appreciated if it's in the report as well. So.
Yep, we'll get that info to you for sure. Okay, call to question on the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation number 2, please. Councilor Norbury.
The council approves the capital expenditures from the 2020 capital budget for the replacement of the airport's runway lighting system of $435,000.
Seconder, Councilor Kukalka. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation number 3, please. Councilor Lehman.
That council approves a grant application prior to the closing date of January 13th, 2020 for 75% of the funding to the BC Air Access Program for the replacement of the airport lighting system.
Seconder, Councilor Kukalka. Any comments? I think this upgrade is well overdue. I think a lot of our emergency air vacs have been prevented because of this airport lighting system has been outdated. So I definitely am in support of this. Councilor Norbury.
And to follow up that, Mayor, is that it increases the accessibility of our airport as well by 7%. And some people may think 7%, oh, that's this or that. But if it comes down to your family or someone you care about's well-being, that 7% matters.
I agree. Okay, call to question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 9.4, Community Safety Officers in Tumbler Ridge. A report from the Director of Protective Services dated December 9th, 2019. Requested by Council to provide information on the potential of having community safety officers in Tumbler Ridge. Recommendation, please. Councilor Kukalka.
I'd like to move for discussion.
Seconder. Councilor Kirby. All in favor? Carried. Councilor Kukalka.
Yeah, I just want to make it quick. I didn't get in to see Mr. Wall today, so just want to thank him for the report, and I thank council for supporting it. I think in the report it kind of says, you know, some goods and some bads. So I thank him for the report, and maybe just leave it for now and see how some of these other communities make out, and then maybe.
Any comments? Councilor Norbury.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Kukalka. Reading the report, this is still in its inception phase. It's still being tested out, and I'm looking forward to see how these pilot projects continue.
I agree. Okay. Moving on to 9.5, temporary commercial or industrial use permit for 295 Southgate Street. Councilor Kirby.
I'm going to excuse myself, just could be a conflict of interest in conversations.
Yep,
Thank you.
gotcha. Report from Director of Economic Development and Tourism seeking approval of a temporary commercial or industrial use permit application for 295 Southgate Street. Recommendation, please. Councilor Norbury.
The council authorized the public notification to be affected neighbors for a proposed temporary commercial or industrial use permit to Mr. Christopher Homister of Budget Power Sports and Marine, 295 Southgate Street, Tumbler Ridge. Plan 28568 to conduct the C2 business of a small engine and jet boat repairs and rental sales of snowmobiles, ATVs, and boats which are not permitted in a C1 zone.
Retail, not rental.
My mistake.
Yep, no problem. Seconder, Councilor Kukalka. Any comments? Councilor Norbury.
I apologize for the recommendation. A librarian should be able to read from a page a little better. But I'm in support of this next step in allowing them to potentially move from a C1 to a C2 zone.
Okay.
Because I believe that it promotes business, and it would take advantage of the space that's currently open.
Yep, I agree that space is very challenging, but this seems to be a business that we don't currently have at the moment. So I like the idea of the temporary permit to not only give the business a chance, but also see if it's viable or not. Councillor Howe?
I'm totally in support of pushing this through. I just have some questions around how the zoning changed in that area from C2 to C1, and now we're looking to bring it back to a C2. Because I was shocked to find out myself that you could not do this type of a business in that area. Just assumed that you could. Shell, for years and years, rebuilt engines in that area and did all types of this exact same work, and likely rebuilt snowmobiles and ATVs in there. So I'm just concerned. I want to make sure that there's nothing in there that we zoned it to a C1, so that we were avoiding something for environmental regulations or anything along those lines, with it going from an active fuel station to an inactive one in 2013.
Yeah, I know the recent rezoning was, the building was sitting empty. Staff noticed that the zoning for both the Shell property, old Shell property and Chevron were not zoned correctly. So at the time, we lumped in the Shell station with the Chevron station at the same time. At that time, it was sitting empty. We had no idea what was future plans for it. But as far as the contamination goes, the entire yard has been cleaned up. As far as I understand, there's a very thick binder of all the paperwork on it. But there is a covenant by Shell for the ground underneath the building, because they can't test underneath the building. So they're not allowed to do any type of groundwork, anything like that. So, Councillor Howe.
My concern primarily around is liabilities to the district of Tumbler Ridge in this change. Is there none? If there are none, then I have no issues.
Liabilities, Mr. Wall.
So in one of the regulations that we have as a municipality is that when you're going through a land sale or rezoning, you might be required to submit a site profile. What site profiles are a provincial government tool that you go through a checklist, and there's a number of different uses. And if you're able to check off that there's no risk of any contamination, you don't need to proceed with the site profile. In a old service station, it's something that you need to do, but this is something that was taken care of and registered with the provincial government prior to the sale to the homesters, I believe. If that hadn't been done, we would not be able to proceed as we are now, but that has been taken care of, so we don't have any concerns.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, call to question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Oh, we just changed it this year. Previously? Oh, I don't know. Okay, moving on to 9.6, schedule of meetings. Everybody get a chance to have a look at that? Any issues there or conflicts? Nope. Okay, moving on to notice of motions. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you. I have two. First, that council add to the 2020 budget discussions $30,000 over 3 years to be donated to the South Peace Health Service Society for the purpose of the Palm Trees Community House Project.
Okay.
Second, that council requests a report on sidewalks in the downtown core and solutions for repair.
Like it. Okay, 10.1. Letter of support to Karen Goodings. Councillor Kirby.
Yes, I'd like to move that the district sends a letter of support to Karen Goodings for the Alaska Highway Community Society, stating that the district of Tumbler Ridge supports the designation of the Alaska Highway Corridor as a National Historic Site in the category of place.
Seconder. Councillor Lehman. Any comments? Councillor Majinski.
Thank you, Member Chen. Just a quick question. Is that in conjunction with the Gotta Go initiative, or is that completely separate?
It's separate.
Because
it is another initiative by that society, but this is just different from that.
Councillor Norbury.
Yeah, I'm in support. I think it's a great idea, Councillor Kirby, in that it creates more awareness in the region, gives people more reason to come to the area, and hopefully they'll swing through Tumbler Ridge when they come up here.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, call to question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any other notice of motions, council? Okay, moving on to councilors' business. So I had quite a few meetings here. We did have our Let's Talk a week or so ago. I thought it went fairly well. I recently had a meeting with Northern Lights College with the Resource Municipalities Coalition to try and breed collaboration between us both, and going to be trying to put together a regional education industry advisory committee. It seems like there's a big disconnect between the two. I attended a special meeting last week at the PRRD, and we had a big delegation by the agricultural producers in the area, in the Peace region, and a couple weeks ago the situation was dire. A lot of crop left in the fields, and of course insurance money was not coming till the new year, so there was a big cash crunch and really looking for support in any way, so that was eye-opening, definitely. And then of course the Caribou Leadership Table in Vancouver. I gave all council a bit of a report on that. Can't say it was very productive, but we did get everybody in the same room to air out some laundry and also express our concerns about the whole thing. And I offered a few suggestions, but speaking with Mr. Lekstrom, he has been in contact with the Premier directly, and it sounds like the Premier is going to be issuing a formal response to the meeting. So I'm looking forward to that response. Hopefully some of my suggestions will be in it. And I had a meeting with Northern Health, as well as Councillor Gorkalka, and we were trying to find time to make availability for the administrator and the chief of staff to meet with Tumbler Ridge residents to discuss any issues. So hopefully that continues in planning process. I think that's it for now. Oh, and of course we hosted the Russians. Fantastic job. Staff, well done. I'd like to give a big shout out to Deb Carr Ventures for feeding the boys all week and girl. Just hats off to this community again. We're certainly showing the world that we can host anybody, and it's a pretty incredible place to be. So yeah, very proud of that. Thank you again to staff. Any other councillors' business? Okay. Thank you again, Councillor Kirby and Councillor Norbury, for those reports. Question and answer period. Any question from the press regarding tonight's agenda? Thank you. Resolution to close meeting, please. Recommendation. Councillor Lehman.
That the meeting is closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Section 90, Subsection 1, C and E as follows. C, labor relations and other employee relations. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land improvements if the council considers that the disclosure could be reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality.
Seconder. Councillor Kirby. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. 10-minute recess, please.